Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome editor Maura Corey A.C.E, who joins us to talk about their work on Nobody Wants This. Maura will talk us through editing the show and getting the right balance of comedic and dramatic tone. Please be warned, there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Maura. Hi, Maura. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No, thank you very much for coming on, and I'm excited to talk about Nobody Wants This, which came out last year. But I think it's one of those Netflix shows that sort of blew up, and I think people are still talking about it. And as we head into sort of potential award season,
Yeah.
um, which for yourself, like, how does that feel? Like, and how do you feel about the whole reception and the sort of life that the show has taken on Netflix?
I was so pleased at the reception. I knew when I cut the pilot, once I had gotten my editor's cut done, I was really blown away by how good it was. And I thought to myself, either people are going to go crazy over this or it's nobody's gonna know. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't gonna be like a middling show. It was either gonna be huge or it would just be lost in the shuffle. But I mean, people responded the way I responded when I actually put it together. I was like, wow, this is something that was really cool and super bingeable. You love the characters. So I wasn't super surprised that it got the reception. I was really excited it got the reception because it's so many times you put stuff out, and even though it's like in your heart and soul, you think it's the best thing you've ever done. Sometimes people just don't see it. So when they do, it's a huge boon.
Think as well, like you make a good point, is that when people you'll be working on something for I don't know how long the post process might be on some shows. I bet you could range from maybe 2 months to 6 months, depending on
Yeah.
the show or how many episodes you cut and so on. But then I guess it's like a double-edged sword of Netflix where people can see things that they might not have seen before, but then
Yeah.
also people binge watch it, but then it's just such a weird sort of like juggling act of how
Yeah.
people should be watching shows and how they could be
Yeah.
enjoying it. But then also the episodes are so short that it's just good sort of feel good, funny episodes as well.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, it really feels like a long movie in a weird way. Like, why not? I mean, because each episode just, it's not like we have cliffhangers, but you're following these people's lives, and it just feels like you want to see what happens to them next. And we even at the end, we're like, when we saw the pilot, I'm like, people are going to want to see, well, what happens next and what happens next. And I think that's one of the reasons the show works as a bingeable comedy is and a romantic comedies because we're falling in love with the characters as they're falling in love. So that's one of the reasons why I think people were able to like sit down and watch in a day, basically.
yes, and it's probably just it is very easy to watch. And when it came to cutting the show as well, like I you guys must have had a lot of fun watching the dailies and constructing the episodes together. How do you go about cutting a show that is quite doesn't have a lot of fat on it, and but it has a lot of sort of comedic and dramatic elements? How do you
Mm.
go about cutting it so you get the right mix of
Drama
all
and
three?
comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things especially in a dramedy, in a romantic comedy too, you want to watch all the footage and be true to what the scene is supposed to be. So there are certain scenes that are very specifically comic. So like in the pilot, it's very specific, like when the family is at the restaurant and they're celebrating a divorce, we know that's a funny scene. So we want to lean into, the tool set that would make a comedy. Quick cutting, until you want the big pauses to, land on the reactions. You want to get a lot of reaction cuts. We purposely leaned into as much improv that the actors gave. especially somebody like Michael Hitchcock who's really good at stuff like that. And all their nonverbal communication, there's a lot of looks, sideline glances that create a comic scene. So you watch all the footage, you make sure to cut it so all the jokes are landing. Then when you take a turn and go into more dramatic moments, you want to be true to that as a scene. So you take the time to watch and make sure where you can put the pauses in so the drama lands and so or the romance lands. So for instance, when we get the meet cute at the party, we have a couple shots that are nonverbal between Joanne and Noah while he's pouring the wine, which are them just looking at each other and make sure that those are long enough so we can feel them taking each other in and creating this point of view that they're noticing each other. So it's more about just being true to what the scene's supposed to be and then melding elements to make sure that you're not getting emotional whiplash. And so the tone feels like a natural tone of people you're actually seeing and meeting for the first time.
I like that. There's a lot to take in from your answer, and I think starting off is by watching the footage because with a show like this, I'm gonna make a guess, and you can tell me if I'm completely way off the mark or
Okay.
I've got the bullseye. They'll probably do three takes of what was on the script, and then potentially the fourth take, they would just say improvise the scene and let it play out slightly differently to what we've written for it.
It wasn't quite that so much as they did, because I've been on shows like that. This one was interesting. They, all the actors are really accomplished actors. So even when they just did the lines straight, they were really good at it. But what the context I think happened was they said, look, here are the lines, and it doesn't have to be said exactly the way, but put in like react to each other. So we cross shot it. So we have camera on one person and camera on the other. So you get their natural reaction to people. And it was more about their nonverbal communication than it was basically about repeating the lines and the reaction to each other just in body language pretty much. I mean there was a lot of improv, but like those were more like buttons. Like they would let the scene go and then people would just keep talking. So it was more of just like letting them inhabit the characters and say, well, this is kind of what the characters would say. And if it feels more comfortable to say it in your way, please do. And we'll work that in. Does that make any sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
I think it's so I was way off the mark. So, but what I know what you mean in that sense because there's a lot more to what you're cutting than just people saying lines,
Yeah.
and it's the it's the way that it's like the way that people are reacting to scenes, and as you
Hmm.
said, looks. It's the way that they might perceive, you might hold on to a look for a second more rather than cutting out like you would on, let's just say a procedural, for example. So you,
100%.
and then you're kind of letting the scene breathe a bit more. And I guess as a audience, because this is a show about a laugh track, you can kind of take that as a cue to laugh or be like, oh, that's a bit frosty or that's a bit much for someone to say. But I totally get what you mean. And it's fascinating as well, like as an editor, because you watch things back hundreds of times,
Yes.
which w could drive someone slightly crazy.
Drives my husband crazy, I can tell you that.
Because you would hear the same sort of lines of dialogue or whatever, and then just for that one scene. But when you're watching the dailies back and thinking about how a scene could be constructed, you look at the looks as well, but what else do you look for in the scene so that you know how to then put it onto your timeline to start putting it together?
Great question. Yeah. So I watch all the footage because I feel like the scene's going to tell me what it wants to be, right? So directors definitely have a plan in mind of like, here's your master shot, here's your close-ups, but I don't want to think of it in that terms. I want to watch all the footage and see what is my anchor. So if there is a specific line reading of a line that maybe the last line, I'm like, I'm going to build my whole scene around that last line. Or if it's a quirky pause, I want to put that in. Or if it's just raise an eyebrow. I'm like, oh, I know that's going to be my anchor. So I look at it in terms of trying what makes me laugh or what makes me cry. That's going to be the crux of my scene. And then I'll build around that to get to that point and get out of that point. So yeah, that's kind of how I put it in. Like if you look at even just a simple scene of Morgan and Joanne doing the podcast in the beginning, which basically gives us our setup that Joanne is a terrible dating person. And they're sitting on a couch. There's no blocking really. But if you watch the reaction between the two characters, Kristen Bell does this thing where she's concentrating on what Morgan's saying, and Morgan keeps saying, because you don't date people because no, we got that, Morgan, we got that. And that was in there, but the way she did it, I'm like, that's the line I want to use. So I'm going to build out from there to get to this brilliant performance and make this the best it can be.
Wow, that's quite cool. And then seeing that, I don't know, just it's kind of like you're seeing magic before. I guess you see like the model before you've molded it all together in a
Yeah.
way that you know that that would be your stem for your starting point, and that's a really interesting way of
I
looking at
mean,
it.
that's the way I do it. I'm sure other editors would think I'm nuts, but
Well, but then that's just the variety of people and how they work and what they do. One person might think it's nuts, another person might think it's genius, then another
yeah.
person is like, never in a million years I would have to do it in a completely different way. But
Yeah.
that's also the way people interpret scenes and
Yeah.
build it around. And then also you'll get input from your showrunners, probably producers as
Sure.
well. And
Yeah.
you're bringing something that they might not have thought of, or
Yeah.
even at the time, because you're going through a whole shoot day, which, I don't know, 10 to 12 hours of trying to make sure you make the day. You may not pick up on things like that. And it's kind of like not happy accidents because they're not
Yeah.
accidents per se, but they're
Yeah.
sort of maybe happy find, should we say, like a hide and seek sort of like let's see what the actor's hidden in here for me today to unlock the scene so that I can build around it.
Yeah.
But there was something else that came to my mind as well, regarding what you've said as well is like how it even though they're about 20 to half an hour episodes, but it does feel like a very you could watch it all as one. It can make you feel like one film if you watch it all at once. But because there's other editors working on the show, how do you
Yeah.
guys collaborate to make sure that there's continuity between how the tone and feel of the show is
Right.
and how the episodes kind of link with one another?
So we do talk, it's basically talking about what visual language we want to do. So I was lucky enough to do the pilot, and me and the director, Greg Matola, came up with a visual style. I mean, he came up with a visual, we came up with a visual language of how to tell the story and how to make it feel. And my edit partner, Keenan Height, who did a fabulous job on episode 2, we talked about it, like what the music should feel like and how we should approach these characters and how the scenes should be looked at, because it is a comedy, but you don't want to tip it into it's not a broad comedy, so you don't want to tip it into broad comedy area. And there's certain kind of music styles that we experimented with. So I think it was just about watching each other's cuts and talking to each other to make sure that we were on the same page tonally. And then once you get into the first couple episodes and you get your footing, from there it's a natural progression of how things are being built.
Another sort of form of another collaboration where
Yeah.
we won't see because there's so many. There's with let me start again. There's another collaboration we won't see because it's, I guess you guys you can post and sort of hidden away. But it's all again having those discussions and hearing about the discussions about
Yeah.
how you can match the tone and not go how you shouldn't have one way or the you shouldn't go too far away from what you guys are aiming for. Which I can with something like this, it's probably quite easy to do if you went a little bit too. too dramatic or too comedic
Hmm.
with the way that you're cutting. And it must be like a really, really fine line to think, oh, okay, so on episode one, on the pilot, we did it like this, but then on episode seven, it's going to be like this. Are there times when you go back to an episode that you've cut after cutting another episode, just because of the way that just because of the ideas that you might have had whilst cutting a future episode compared to the pilot, but then also you might be watching that episode in a different light?
Absolutely. I mean, I think part of what episodic TV has is the ability to dip into ideas you had prior and apply them to future episodes to make sure that you have, maybe there's music choices that you did in the first one that didn't quite fit, but you're like, oh, I don't want to forget that because I really like the way this toned. This works, and this music works as a nighttime scene, not a daytime scene. You just squirrel away all those little nuggets to weave the same tone. And so you do have a bit of muscle memory as you move through these. So that's one of the things that's nice when you're immersed into a show that's, 10 episodes. But yeah, you do. And you look again, I talked with my edit partner and I had I talk to my, it's very collaborative. So you want to make sure that you are constantly revisiting and allowing yourself to be open to things you did in the past, but also not being so weighed down that the future episodes might give you even a bigger door that you can open. So some of the other episodes, like we did the one where they're playing basketball, that's a little funnier in the fact it's a lighter episode. There's not a ton of drama. There's a little bit of a callback to Mean Girls, so we did some more stylized stuff, but it still works in the context of this world of Joanne and Noah, right? So you don't want to box yourself in, but you also want to make sure that the foundation is there that you can always have a touchstone back to.
As well, you want to give sort of space for other characters to breathe in the show. Even though we
Exactly.
do, even though we do follow Joanne and Noah, it's sometimes it is those supporting characters that just add another sort of
Oh,
flavor to the stew
yeah,
that you
for
just
sure.
like. Can we go back to them for like an extra 5 minutes, please?
I agree. I mean, I think that the whole familial character storylines are added to this whole thing because, the loser sibling storyline is hilarious, but it's also a part of what this larger world is that our main characters are in. So it enlarges it makes their world bigger and it makes us feel more a part of this, makes it feel more real than we're just in this, bubble.
Yes, and I think when if you do just if they just did focus on just the sort of couple, it wouldn't hit as
It wouldn't hit as
hard.
hard for sure.
Yeah, and it those sort of supporting characters do help with like just really obviously they'll layer the show in the writing and help push the story along,
Yeah.
or maybe hinder the story, but at the same time, yeah, you kind of do get them, and you do sort of enjoy that aspect of it. Plus, having sort of maybe actors that you might not recognize or seen before help with like sort of getting surprised by their work and then wanting to check their previous work out as well.
Yeah.
You mentioned about music choices in the show,
Mm.
and there's a mixture of live tracks and also the composed soundtrack.
Hmm.
Um, when you're cutting, do producers and showrunners have songs in mind whilst you're cutting, or
Hmm.
is it something that comes up later on? And then do the songs affect the way that you would like the scene to be edited?
Yes to all of those. So first off, it depends on the script, whether the producers, writers, or even director have something in mind coming in. That's more that's rarer. We did have a music supervisor, S.D. Haim, who was amazing. But also a lot of it comes from me and my assistant. So, or anybody really, we'll take suggestions from anybody. But but it will absolutely change the way you edit. For needle drop specifically, I'll give you an example for the needle drop. So in episode, I think it was 7, we did a basketball. They're playing basketball, right? And there's this moment where the girls are in the stands and the boys are playing, and someone says, "Let's play a drinking game. Let's have a shot every time." They make a shot, and someone says, "No, I want to get drunk. Let's do one every time they miss." Right. So then we created this montage out of extra footage to Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba. And the way the song hit with the basketball, because it's you get knocked down, and then I have the basketball hit, and then you get up again, and then so we cut it to the song, and it was really funny. And so we were like, well, are we going to use Chumbawamba? Can we afford Chumbawamba? Blah blah blah. So we tried different songs underneath, and it just didn't hit the same. So when we put it back in, we're like, yes, we're going to try to fight for this piece of music because it really matched this idea of these. This was kind of the song that these people would be listening to if they were drinking in high school. It had a lot of elements to it. And in effect, the same thing in the pilot when we had the Haim song. There's a little montage where Joanne and Noah have met, and then there's this montage of them thinking about each other, and the song starts on him closing her car door, and you hear the song starts, and it's I'm in it, just for a minute, and it goes through with him playing basketball, her smelling his coat, blah blah blah, and it ends right on the strike of the match where he's in the temple. And so there's a very specific cutting pattern to that to make sure that we hit those points, and those points emotionally resonate as to how these people are feeling. Uh, and with score, it's the same thing. So you want to make sure that you don't overscore moments so they feel too schmaltzy or too sticky, or you don't want it to feel like, oh, this is the comedy part or this is the drama part. You want it to come in to emotionally support what you're doing without overwhelming what is on the screen.
Again, what a fine line to walk in terms of
Yeah.
with the composed soundtrack to have that idea of like not wanting to be too schmaltzy, but then you
Hmm.
still want it to hit in a certain way. And yeah, I don't know if my brain could comprehend all of these sort of decisions a little bit because it's like a lot of it feels like a Rubik's Cube sort of thing where if you move it a little bit too much to one side, it might be too overwhelming for the scene,
Yeah.
and then it might not be too overwhelming. But
It's
then
fun to try those things though, because if they do overwhelm, you're like, well, that didn't work. Let's go back.
undo, undo.
Undo, undo, FLD.
But then also with like the music that like got from that a music supervisor provides, those sort of things as well. Like when you're cutting towards it, because I guess you have I guess like how many beats per minute, or even the way
Mm,
that like the bass might be, or just how because if it's like beats per minute, you become your cutting will be slightly more aggressive with like how quick you want to do it, and then hitting those certain marks
yeah.
on the songs, and that's an art in itself as well, where you may have the footage, but it's like, oh, if we just maybe slow it down just to push it back so we can hit the right time for the song to match
Yeah.
the cut.
Yeah. You do a lot of that's when you get notes, it gets a little tricky to make sure that those things still hit. So one of the things is having a great music editor as a partner too, which we did. Mike was amazing. And being able to understand like how to edit music, because I could go in a whole boring technical thing on it, but it is more about maintaining the emotional feeling is king. Like you want to make sure that people are feeling it, even if maybe it's a couple frames different than your original cut.
Yeah, and again, fine line, and and also fine margins of how you cut stuff because, as you said, you go too much one way, or even though you will explore that avenue, you still have to be very delicate with how you're doing it, so it doesn't become too over the top. Just to hit you up, I've got two questions left. For my penultimate question, what was your favorite scene that you didn't edit?
Oh, that's a great question.
I love asking this question. I'd love it.
Um, I mean, the kiss probably. I wish I would have edited the kiss. That was really well done, and Keenan did a great job.
You know, when you see something like that, I know you're complimentary of Keenan, and but when it comes to something like that, do you ever think, I could have done it just slightly different, or do
Oh,
you, or do you think actually he's nailed it, and I don't think I could ever improve on that.
that's interesting. I mean, yeah, I mean, of course, I probably would say, yes, I could have cut it different. I don't know. I mean, I'd have to watch the footage. Part of me is like, there's the person who edits and there's the person who just watches for the pleasure of watching. I do think that every editor, if they dug into some other editor's scene, would say, I would do this differently. And that's what makes it an amazing talent and collaboration. And that's why I love working in this business because people have so many different ways to attack something. And that's what I think this business is so great. And editing specifically. So like when Keenan and I talk about scenes, we're like, wow, I never thought to do it that way, but it works. And if it works, then what do I care how it's done? If it's as beautiful as it is, being able to recognize how good something can be that you didn't do is such a great honor to be working with people like that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way of looking at it. Just because I guess you just have a different appreciation to how people work and
Well, I mean,
how
just
they
because you
understand as
can do it
well.
different, yeah, just because you can do something different doesn't mean you should, because if they're doing something that's their expression, I want to celebrate that, right?
Yeah,
I
of
mean,
course.
if it doesn't work, then that's a whole different story. But
Yeah, that's a conversation for another time when that sort of happens and you see someone's work like that, and you're like, oof, might need to go back to the drawing board. Just for my final question, what was your favorite scene to edit?
wow, there was a lot of them. I'll have to say, I mean, there was a lot of them, but I will say the dinner scene in the pilot, after looking at stuff, was one of my favorite scenes, and it was the the beginning part where Joanne is talking about her career, and Noah leans over to his friend and he's like, "Who's that?" And she goes, "I don't know. He's into that guy." And so he's like, "No way is he into that guy." So there's a lot of like, there's some really cool rack focuses. The way Greg Matola framed some of the stuff was very unusual in the best of ways. I'm like, we're getting some French overs. I was like, these really work because we can see Joanne in the middle. I don't know how he did it, but I remember when we were doing it, I'm like, this is working great. Table scenes are so hard, by the way. I don't people table scenes are the hardest thing to shoot, cut, and make feel like we're not in a deadly space. So to me, this just worked out great. The way we were able to angle Noah tracking Joanne in certain spots and them noticing each other, but not noticing each other. To me, that set up to me the entire launch them into their entire I think you're pretty cool state. And so to me that gets them into launches them into their maybe we should do this kind of thing. Anyway, that was one of my favorites.
That's a solid
And the
choice.
basketball montage, which was fun.
I think both are solid choices. I think the dinner table scene, as you said, that they're difficult to cut and
Yeah.
getting that right balance of what's going on and even giving the actors their moment to shine because it's the same as just if you were doing a dinner scene, if you were in a dinner scene, not a dinner scene, if you were sitting down and having a dinner party with people, it's the same when you're trying to have conversations across the table or next to you, or just trying to sort of grasp of like when are you supposed to speak as well, because you don't want to interrupt someone, but then also you want to add to what's being said. And yeah, it's kind of like in real life cutting, but then also on a show like this would probably be, well, a lot of fun, but then also kind of difficult as well.
It is, and it just felt like you were really at a dinner party. And the way we're able to, if you step through that scene, I mean, again, it would be technically boring for you, but like if you step through that scene, the way they clock each other and the way it's set up and the way the shots were, the cinematographer did a great job and the way they were directed, just it felt like it all came together in this like, oh, I know what this show is, you know.
Yeah. And I think that's a perfect way to end the episode. Thank you so much, Maura. for your time today.
No
Nobody
worries.
Wants This is streaming now on Netflix. Go out and watch Maura's beautiful cutting and her team. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
You take care. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.